Hello guys, what's up? So friends, today I am going to discuss with you about the sulfur cycle and the phosphorus cycle. So the sulfur, it is seen in soil and sediments where it is logged in organic and as well as in or inorganic deposits, such as organic form include coal, oil and peat, and inorganic deposits include pyrite rock, sulfur rock, etc. That is in the form of sulfates, sulfides, and organic sulfur. It is released by weathering of rocks, erosional runoff, and decomposition of organic matter, and is carried to terrestrial and aquatic ecosystem in salt solution. The sulfur cycle is mostly sedimentary except two of its compounds, hydrogen sulfide and sulfur dioxide, which adds a gaseous component. The sulfur enters the atmosphere from several sources like volcanic eruption, combustion of fossil fuels from the surface of the ocean, and gases released by the decomposition, etc. And the atmospheric hydrogen sulfide also gets oxidized into sulfur dioxide. The atmospheric sulfur dioxide is carried back to Earth after being dissolved in rainwater as weak sulfuric acid, that is, as acid rain. Whatever the source, the sulfur in the form of sulfates is taken up by the plants and incorporated through a series of metabolic processes into sulfur bearing amino acid, which is incorporated in the protein of autotroph tissues. It then passes through the grazing food chain. So first we can discuss some of the UPSC questions regarding the sulfur cycle. So the first question is, with reference to agricultural soils, consider the following statements. The first option is, a high content of organic matter in soil drastically reduces its water holding capacity. Second, soil does not play any role in the sulfur cycle. Third, irrigation over a period of time can contribute to the salinization of some agricultural lands. Which of these statements given above are correct? So in these statements, the option A is correct. That is, a high content of organic matter, that is humus, in soil increases its water holding capacity. Then, so let's start our lecture about sulfur cycle. So friends, sulfur cycle is a type of sedimentary cycle. The sulfur cycle is the collection of processes by which sulfur moves between rocks, waterways, and living systems. It involves the transformation of sulfur species through different oxidation states, which play an important role in both geological and biological processes. And sulfur in the environment. In soil, sulfur may be present in a variety of organic and inorganic forms. The form of sulfur taken up by plants is sulfate sulfur. Okay, the form of sulfur taken up by plants is sulfate sulfur. In the atmosphere, the most abundant sulfur species is COS, that is carbonyl sulfur. So friends, in the atmosphere, the most abundant sulfur species is COS or carbonyl sulfur. Then other species include hydrogen sulfide, dimethyl sulfide, and carbon disulfide, SO2, etc. Common naturally occurring sulfur compounds include sulfide minerals such as pyrite or iron sulfide, galena or lead sulfide, etc., and the sulfate minerals such as gypsum. Gypsum is otherwise known as calcium sulfate. Then alunite, that is potassium aluminium sulfate, etc. So these are the common naturally occurring sulfur compounds. Then the man-made sources of sulfur include detergents, fossil fuel combustion, smelting, manufacture of sulfuric acid, conversion of wood pulp to paper, incineration of refuse and production of elemental sulfur. There are also a variety of natural sources that emit sulfur directly into the atmosphere, including volcanoes. So this is the picture. You can see this is sulfur vent in Lassen Volcanic National Park. This here the yellowish sulfur deposits are visible near the mouth of the vent. Then the biological importance of sulfur. Sulfur is an essential component of the biosphere since it is involved in the formation of chemical structure of living organism. The protoplasm normally contain 0.4 to 1.0% of sulfur as organic sulfur compounds. Sulfur is one of the components that make up the proteins and vitamins. Proteins contain amino acids that contain sulfur atoms. Then sulfur is a minor constituent of fats, body fluids and skeletal minerals. Then the economic importance of sulfur. Sulfur is intimately involved in the production of fossil fuels and the majority of metal deposits because of its ability to act as oxidizing or reducing agents. Over 90% of the sulfur mined by modern society is used to produce sulfuric acid. Sulfuric acid in turn is used in the manufacture of fertilizers and a host of chemical products. Sulfur dichloride and disulfur dichloride are important industrial chemicals. Then sulfur is used in the vulcanization of rubber as a fungicide and in black gunpowder. Sulfates are used to bleach paper and as preservatives for many foodstuffs. Many surfactants and detergents are sulfur derivatives. Then calcium sulfate or gypsum used in the cement and plaster. Some are added to natural gas because of its distinctive smell so that gas leak can be detected easily. So we know the hydrogen sulfide has a kind of smell, so that due to these types of smell, usually the compounds of sulfur is usually added in the natural gas so that the gas leak can be detected easily. Then it is also used in silver polish. Then it is the diagram of sulfur cycle. So mainly the sulfate is deposited in the atmosphere mainly in two types, that is dry deposition and wet deposition. The sulfur in fossil fuels, the sulfur is contained in the fossil fuels, so that after mining the fossil fuels are get burned and smelted and thus generate SO2, sulfur dioxide, and this is get into the atmosphere. And from the volcanoes also SO2 is generated. H2S sulfur H2S hydrogen sulfide is also generated. Then by the decomposition of living things and waste products, sulfates are generated, and then it is taken by the plants again. From the wet deposition, the sulfates get dissolved in the water, and it is also get deposited in the sediments form, and by that weathering of that sediments, these compounds are again formed. So this is cycled again. This is all about the sulfur cycle. Then here we have the explanation. The sulfur cycle contains both atmospheric and terrestrial processes. Within the terrestrial portion, the cycle begins with the weathering of rocks, releasing the stored sulfur to the environment. The sulfur then comes in contact with air, where it is converted into sulfate. Sulfate means SO4 2-. The sulfate is taken up by the plants and microorganisms and is converted into organic forms. The assimilation of sulfur by plants is termed as assimilatory sulfur reduction or ASR. Okay, the assimilation of sulfur by plants is termed as assimilatory sulfur reduction or ASR. Animals then consume these organic forms of sulfur through food they eat, thereby moving the sulfur through the food chain. The organic sulfur formed within the plant or animal body is converted into hydrogen sulfide H2S or sulfates when the decay or putrefaction of dead material takes place. Under aerobic condition, the removal of sulfur, that is desulfurization. Okay, the removal of sulfur is termed as desulfurization. The removal of sulfur from organic compounds results in the formation of sulfate, whereas under anaerobic conditions, hydrogen sulfide is generally produced. H2S may also be formed by dissimilatory sulfate reduction or DSR. There are also a variety of natural sources that emit sulfur directly into the atmosphere, including volcanic eruptions, breakdown of organic matter in swamps and tidal floods, and the evaporation of water. Then we know the SO2 in the atmosphere get oxidized with the water, the forming sulfuric acid. So acid rain. In acid rain, H2SO4 is a fundamental primary component. The sulfur eventually settles back into the earth or comes down within rainfall. A continuous loss of sulfur from terrestrial ecosystem runoff occurs through drainage into lakes and streams and eventually oceans. Sulfur also enters the ocean through fallout from the Earth's atmosphere. Within the ocean, some sulfur cycles through marine communities moving through the food chain. A portion of this sulfur emitted back into the atmosphere from sea spray. Okay, a portion of this sulfur emitted back into the atmosphere from sea spray. The remaining sulfur is lost to the ocean depths, combining with iron to form ferrous sulfide, which is responsible for the black color of most marine sediments. Then, friends, it's all about our sulfur cycle. Then we are going to next the introduction to a phosphorus cycle. So phosphorus plays a central role in aquatic ecosystems and water quality. Unlike carbon and nitrogen, which come primarily from the atmosphere, phosphorus occurs in large amount as a mineral in phosphate rocks and enters the cycle from erosion and mining activities. So friends, mainly this phosphorus occurs in large amount in minerals in phosphate rocks. Okay, and it enters the cycle from erosion and mining activities. This is the nutrient considered to be the main cause of excessive growth of rooted and free floating microscopic plants in lakes that leads to eutrophication. So we know eutrophication is the enrichment of nutrients in the lake. So the main component for this eutrophication is phosphorus. The main storage for phosphorus is in the earth crust. On land, phosphorus is usually found in the form of phosphates. By the process of weathering and erosion, phosphates enters rivers, streams, and finally oceans. In the ocean, phosphorus accumulates on continental shelves in the form of insoluble deposits. After millions of years, the crustal plates rise from the seafloor and expose the phosphates on the land. After more time, weathering will release them from rock and the cycle's geochemical phase begins again. So it is a short summary of phosphorus cycle. So let's explain in detail. So the phosphorus cycle is the biogeochemical cycle that describes the movement of phosphorus through the lithosphere, hydrosphere, and biosphere. Unlike many other biogeochemical cycles, the atmosphere does not play a significant role in the movement of phosphorus because phosphorus and phosphorus-based compounds are usually solids at the typical ranges of temperature and pressure found on Earth. Therefore, it is a sedimentary cycle. Then phosphorus in the environment. Phosphorus is not found in the nature in the free state but is widely distributed in the lithosphere as combination. The five forms of phosphorus in soil are labile organic form, labile inorganic form, mineral form, stable form and soluble form. In soil, phosphorus can be seen as a rock phosphate or phosphorite, iron phosphate, calcium phosphate or apatite, aluminium phosphate. The lithosphere serves as the reserve of phosphorus for the biosphere being released by the process of weathering. Most of the phosphorus is present as insoluble calcium phosphate and is biologically unavailable. No stable form of phosphorus can be seen in the atmosphere. Phosphorus in water exists in two main forms, that is dissolved form or soluble form and particulate form, or that is attached to a component of particulate matter. Orthophosphate is the primary dissolved form of phosphorus and is readily available to algae and aquatic plants. So friends, so it is a important point. Let's listen. Orthophosphate. Okay, orthophosphate is the primary dissolved form of phosphorus and is readily available to algae and aquatic plants. The agricultural runoff, that is fertilizers, sewage, detergents are the man-made sources of phosphorus. Then ecological functions of phosphorus. Phosphorus is an essential nutrient for plants and animals. It is a limiting nutrient for aquatic organisms. Phosphorus form part of the important life-sustaining molecules that are very common in the biosphere. 80% of the mined phosphorus is used to make fertilizers. Over enrichment of phosphate in both fresh and inshore marine waters can lead to massive algal blooms, which when they die and decay leads to eutrophication. Then biological importance of phosphorus. Phosphorus is a major constituent of biological membranes, energy-rich compounds and nucleic acids. The primary importance of phosphorus is as a component of nucleotides, which serves as energy storage within cells or ATP, or when linked together form the nucleic acids DNA and RNA. The double helix of our DNA is only possible because of the phosphate ester bridge that binds the helix. Besides making biomolecule, phosphorus is also found in bone and the enamel of mammalian teeth, whose strength is derived from calcium phosphate in the form of hydroxypyrite. In addition, many animals also need large quantities of this element to make shells, bone and teeth. It is also found in the exoskeleton of insects and phospholipids. It also functions as a buffering agent in maintaining acid-base homeostasis in human body. So here we can see the diagram of phosphorus cycle. So we know the rocks which contain the phosphate after weathering, these are getting into the water, because here the weathering agents are mainly wind and rain, which erode phosphate rich rocks. The runoff from weathering and agricultural farming get into the water, and then dissolved phosphate is getting then from the decomposition of animals and plants we get inorganic phosphate, which are absorbed by the plants. So the plants absorb phosphorus and then these plants are eaten by the animals. Okay, so this is a simple diagram. So we can explain detail. So the phosphorus cycle steps. The phosphorus cycle goes through 5 main steps: weathering, absorption by the plants, absorption by animals, return to the soil by decomposition and sedimentation. First is weathering. In light of the fact that phosphorus is most commonly found in rocks, the phosphorus cycle starts in the earth crust. In nature, phosphorus is found mostly in the form of phosphate ions, that is PO4 3-. Phosphate compounds are found in sedimentary rocks, and as the rocks weather wear down over long period of time, the phosphorus they contain slowly leaches into surface water and soils. This inorganic phosphate is distributed in soil and water. Then second step is absorption by the plants. Plants take up the inorganic phosphate from the soil. Aquatic plants absorb inorganic form of phosphorus from water and bottom layer of water bodies. Due to the fact that phosphate salts are not very water soluble, they are also limiting factors for growth of plants in aquatic ecosystem. The plants typically take up orthophosphate from the soil. Much of this remain in an inorganic form, while a part of it is converted into an organic form, that is organic molecules such as DNA. Then the third step is absorption by animals. Animals absorb phosphorus by eating plants or plant eating animals, namely both marine and terrestrial plants are consumed by herbivorous animals, birds and fish. Consequently, the organic form of phosphorus is transferred to the next level of consumers. Hence, the carnivores obtain phosphorus by eating herbivores. They use this phosphorus for various biological functions. Then return to the environment by decomposition. When plants and animals excrete waste or die, the phosphates may be taken up by detritivores or returned to the soil as well as to the ocean. Under conductive environmental conditions, bacteria and other microbes decompose the dead organisms. During decomposition, the organic form of phosphorus is converted into an inorganic form. The process is called mineralization, which is then recycled to the soil and water. So friends, here we have to stress a point, that is what is called mineralization. That is, here the conversion of organic form into inorganic form, that is the term mineralization. Okay, this organic form is available for plants. Then the last is sedimentation. The phosphorus that recycled into the soil will end up in rock formation or sediments, which will remain for millions of years. A part of phosphorus in the soil can end up in waterways and eventually in the oceans. Along with these phosphorus containing compounds from the decay or waste of marine organisms also settle to the ocean floor, forming new sedimentary layers. Over long periods of time, phosphorus containing sedimentary rocks may be moved from the ocean to the land by a geological process called uplift. So, what is meant by uplift? The phosphorus containing sedimentary rocks may be moved from ocean to the land by a geological process called uplift. Then, however, this process is very slow, and an average phosphate ion has an oceanic residence time in the ocean of 20,000 to 1 lakh years. And the major return pathway of phosphorus from ocean to land include decomposition of guano by marine birds and marine fishing. In the end, phosphorus is released again to the soil through weathering and absorbed by the plants, and the phosphorus cycle starts over. So from the picture we can see the guano. So it is released by the marine birds and marine fishing. Then here is the summary, friends. So we have so far discussed about the sulfur cycle and phosphorus cycle. So the sulfur cycle and phosphorus cycle are important sedimentary cycles on the earth. The phosphorus cycle is a typical sedimentary cycle, and unless sulfur, it does not have a major gaseous phase. Okay, so usually phosphorus cycle is recognized as a typical sedimentary cycle. The sulfur cycle is recognized as a gaseous cycle. The main withdrawal of sulfur is brought about by anthropogenic extraction of sulfur from reserves. Return of sulfur either to the reserve or to the atmosphere or release as utilizable form into the biosphere brought about by microorganisms. The basic reservoir of phosphorus is the lithosphere, from which the element is released by the process of weathering. The major return pathway involves uplifting of marine sediments, deposition of guano by marine birds and marine fishing. So guys, it's all about our lecture part of sulfur cycle and phosphorus cycle. I hope you get an overall idea about this portion. So have a nice day, guys.